Right now, the wealthiest 10% of Americans own 93% of the entire stock market. The bottom half of the country owns roughly 1%. Here's the paradox nobody explains properly. Wealth was never supposed to work this way. For most of human history, wealth wasn't stocks, or salaries, or savings accounts. It was something far more physical, and far more brutally simple. And the moment that changed, the exact century wealth stopped being about what you could hold and started being about what you could own on paper, is the moment that quietly built the world we're all living in right now. This is the untold history of wealth, not the story of hard work and thrift you were taught in school. The real one, the one still deciding, right now, who gets richer while everyone else simply gets by. If understanding how the system actually works matters to you, subscribe now, because we're going somewhere most finance channels won't take you. Let's begin. For roughly 10,000 years after the agricultural revolution, wealth meant exactly one thing: land, not money, not gold. Even at first. Land, because land was the only asset that reliably produced more value than it cost to hold. A field produced grain year after year. A grain store didn't. This single fact shaped nearly every civilization that followed. Kings didn't measure their power in coins. They measured it in acres and in the people bound to work them. Wealth, in this era, was almost impossible to create. You could only inherit it, marry into it, or take it by force. There was no stock market, no compound interest, no way for an ordinary person to convert labor into ownership. If you weren't born owning land, you spent your entire life working someone else's. That single limitation, the near impossibility of creating new wealth, held for thousands of years, until one small, unremarkable country figured out something that would quietly rewrite the entire system. In 1602, the Dutch East India Company did something no company in history had ever done. It sold shares of itself to the public and let those shares be freely traded on an open exchange in Amsterdam. Read that sentence again, because it's easy to skim past how strange this actually was. For the first time, an ordinary merchant, someone who owned no land, no army, no royal title, could buy a small piece of ownership in something enormous and sell it again whenever they chose. Wealth had just been unbolted from land for the first time in human history. This is the moment almost nobody's told about properly. Not the invention of money. Humanity had coins and currency for thousands of years already. This is the invention of tradable ownership itself. The idea that a piece of paper could represent a claim on future profit, and that claim could move from hand to hand, faster than the underlying ships, warehouses, or spice routes it represented. Within decades, the idea spread. Government bonds followed a similar logic, a promise, tradable, sellable, detached from any single physical object. Wealth had officially become something you could hold without ever touching. But this new kind of wealth needed one more ingredient before it could truly explode. And that ingredient arrived roughly a century and a half later, in the smoke of English factories. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how goods were made. It changed what wealth actually was. For the first time, the most valuable assets on Earth weren't fields, but factories, machines that could be owned, financed, and scaled in a way land never could. A single factory owner could employ thousands of workers, controlling far more productive output than any medieval landlord ever managed with an entire estate. Here's the part that matters most. Owning the machine mattered more than operating it. A worker who ran a textile loom for 14 hours a day earned a wage. The person who owned that loom earned the profit from every single hour it ran, whether they were in the building or not. That distinction between the person who works the asset and the person who owns it is the exact fault line that would come to define the next 2 centuries of wealth. And it's the same fault line still running directly underneath the number we opened this video with. By the 20th century, stock markets had grown from small trading floors into the central nervous system of the entire global economy. On paper, this looked like democratization. Stock ownership was, in theory, open to anyone with enough savings to buy in. Pension funds, retirement accounts, employee stock plans, all of it seemed to be spreading ownership further than ever before in human history. But here's the part almost nobody examines closely enough. Spreading access to something and spreading the value of that something are 2 completely different outcomes. More people than ever could technically own a piece of a company, but the vast majority of the actual value concentrated in far fewer hands than the participation numbers suggested. Which brings us to exactly where we started. Today, roughly 58% of American households own stock in some form, through a retirement account, a mutual fund, a workplace plan. On the surface, that looks like broad participation in the system built 4 centuries ago in Amsterdam. But participation was never the same as ownership at scale. The wealthiest 10% of Americans hold 93% of all stock market value. The bottom 50%, roughly half the entire country, hold about 1%. The richest 1% alone now control close to 1/3 of all wealth in the United States, the highest share ever recorded since data collection began in 1989. Here's the mechanism connecting all of it, from the Dutch trading floor to your own retirement account. Middle-class wealth tends to sit in one asset, the home someone lives in, which grows in value slowly and can't easily be leveraged into the next investment. Wealth at the very top sits overwhelmingly in equities. Ownership stakes that compound, multiply, and can be borrowed against again and again without ever needing to be sold. Same system, same stock market, same 400-year-old invention. But the return on owning it has never been distributed evenly, and the gap between owning and merely participating has only widened with every decade the system has existed. Here's the quiet thread running underneath 10,000 years of history. Wealth has changed shape 4 times: land, tradable shares, industrial machinery, modern equity markets. But the underlying divide has never actually moved. There has always been a class that owns the productive asset, and a much larger class that works it, rents it, or merely participates in its rising value from a distance. Every shift in history looked, in the moment, like progress. Tradable shares looked like freedom from land. Factories looked like new opportunity. Public stock markets looked like democratized wealth. And each time, the underlying advantage simply relocated to whoever already held the asset before the shift happened, leaving the same basic divide intact in a new disguise. That's the untold history of wealth. Not a story of hard work rewarded. A story of ownership, quietly reinventing itself once every few centuries, always landing in the same hands it started in. If this changed how you see the system you're actually operating inside, subscribe, because understanding history is how you stop being surprised by the present. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.